spend so many hours and hours and hours automating our hands. Did it take me thousands of hours to retrain my hand? Yeah. It took a long time. It was not easy. We'd have a 3-set gig, and then there'd be a month off, and then there'd be another 3-set gig. It's like, okay, now, So at some point, the fingerpicks were like, okay, this is a necessity.
One of the things I love about living in Berlin is how many other musicians I get to meet. And sometimes you meet someone who has been through a lot of the same musical journey as you, but maybe they've just ended up going in a slightly different way. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce to you Nick Morrison. Nick Morrison is a French-American guitarist and singer-songwriter. He's a lecturer at the BIM Music University here in Berlin, and his songs draw on a range of influences including American folk, acoustic blues, and West African music. So I really hope you enjoyed this in-depth chat we had about approaches, influences, and techniques around Nick's music and his guitar playing. Nick Morrison, welcome to the channel. Can you give a brief history, a brief story of where you started and how you came to Berlin, this kind of thing? So you were born in Paris, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll do the short version, right? I was my family is American, but I was born in France. At some point, I finished high school in the U.S. and I had played piano, sort of your typical parents. I wanted to play as well, but so I played classical piano, not super seriously growing up, but well enough to get somewhere with it, to play some Beethoven and stuff by the end, right?
Yeah.
And then when I got to high school, I started casually playing acoustic guitar as a 17 or 18-year-old. And then the real Rubicon moment was during college in Chicago, where I saw, African Americans playing some kind of free jazz, live for the first time. And by this time I had already studied music theory and done some composition, and I wasn't a proficient guitar player, but I was like, okay, there's something here, and I actually want to devote my life to this. At some point, I was in music school at NEC, and I asked one of my teachers there, who had a very personal approach to improvising on the guitar with his fingers. And I could hear that there was something other than jazz and blues that had influenced his approach. And I was like, where does this come from, this thing that you're doing? And he was like, have you ever heard of the kora, right? And the kora is the between 21 and 28 strings, depending on the instrument, but this harp.
Basically like a harp and a
harp
like
built out of a calabash, which is a big pumpkin with a neck, and then the kora.
20 strings?
Between 21 and 28, and so it's like it's there. The strings go down two sides of this neck, and it's like. Da 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 da. All the tones alternate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's so there's this interesting left-right coordination on the kora that's totally different from like a piano, right? Where things are laid out linearly. This is laid out in this kind of mirror way. And I just became fascinated with this music.
What guitar you brought? Let's have a look.
This is a new design by Höfner. So when I was looking around for guitars, I sort of already knew that I definitely didn't want a dreadnought. They're not comfortable for me. I wanted something a little smaller. But this was Höfner's attempt at some innovation. So I guess the bracing system inside is a little different actually from what you have on a Dreadnought, or even the concert or O models of Taylor or Martin. So it has some sort of different bracing system. So it already sounded a little different when I was trying it out in the store. The African instruments like the kora or the ngoni or the balafon, the notes don't sustain very long. Right?
Okay.
The sound of the kora is really a dang. It's a part of that sound that they're playing very fast patterns often, right? And sort of the faster, the more density you get from speed, the more it can be kind of advantageous to not have quite as much sustain, right?
Yeah.
It creates more and more sort of interference and overlap, and some of that is good. But so again, as I was looking for my sound or a sound to develop, it's like, okay, how could I get the notes on this guitar to be a little shorter? I was like, okay, instead of using bone or plastic for the saddle and for the nut, actually, what if I just use ebony? So that was the first thing that I switched out.
Okay, so you changed that yourself.
Yeah.
Is that custom? Did you get that custom?
So I mean, this particular piece here is ordered from somebody who basically pre-shaped a piece of ebony for me that I then did the final sanding and slotted it in. Right. And there's another little thing you can probably barely see here, which is that actually there's a little piece, there's some tape here on the G string, because I was noticing that this, as I was searching between a wound and an unwound G string, and feeling like the wound G string was too dark, and the unwound G string was too bright. The highest treble string on a violin usually has a kind of small mute or piece of rubber attached to it on the bridge, just to shave off just a little bit of the high frequency the harshness.
Yeah, okay.
So that was another little thing that happened, but I mean the biggest thing about my sound and the way this guitar sounds now is that at some point I made the full transition to playing with these fingerpicks. I probably had fingerpicks banging around, almost 20 years now, right? It was like in my early 20s as I was experimenting with approaches to the blues, right? I tried playing a thumb pick and I was like, this is weird,
Yeah. Me too.
Right?
I could never get on with it. I tried finger picks.
Right. And I was in that boat for a long time. And I'll just finish telling the story because I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, one of the things I was doing in Berlin when I got here was I was playing in a blues trio with a singer. That band is called the Soul Thrivers. So I was playing electric guitar in that band, and there was no bass player. So I was the whole rhythm section in that band, right? Sometimes the harmonica player would play drums, sometimes he'd play harmonica, but it was always guitar.
So you'd have to cut through.
I'd have to cut. And it was that we would play. It was blues. Sometimes we'd play 3 sets, in some noisy blues bar, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, after doing this, for some number of hours, right, I was like, I was having the problems that guitar players often have, right?
Yeah.
I always used to say if I were doing this every night or several times a week, it would be no problem. Like then I would have the calluses to do it, right?
Were you playing with nails or just
At that
skin?
time, I was just playing with skin, which I still maintain. It's like if you listen to the way Son House or somebody like that sounds, it's like those are the hands of, farmers who then also played guitar every day, and like a djembe player or something, like those those calluses that you get brightness
sure.
from that, right? But I could never maintain those calluses because I was not doing that music. I was switching to electric guitar and playing with a plectrum.
Yeah.
I was teaching, and I was not gigging blues. So it would be like we'd have a 3-set gig, and then there would be a month off, and then there'd be another 3-set gig. It's like, okay, now if you haven't been if you haven't been maintaining it.
Yeah.
So at some point the fingerpicks were like, okay, this is a necessity. Playing with percussionists outside in Africa, I also knew, it would be great to be able to match their energy or just the attack that they're getting. It would be great to be able to match that without working so hard. The dynamic range that I have now is larger.
For sure,
I would say, right?
Sure. For sure.
I can play a pattern. Let's see. Just a straight Travis picking pattern, right?
Yeah.
And without doing anything, without changing what I'm doing with my right hand, I can foreground different things of this, right? I can foreground the backbeat, right? Or right? I can just and that's how you bring out. That's one of the ways that you bring out melody, right? Just as a pianist needs to dynamically adjust their left and right hands
For sure.
to make sure that the melody is foregrounded in relation to the accompaniment. For me, these instrumental pieces that I've created were all ways of trying to make myself focused on making the guitar sing, right? Without, make the guitar sing, right?
Yeah.
And that can only happen if you are developing this dynamic control. Another reason that I became increasingly obsessed with developing the idea of playing with these was that I also basically wanted to not really need the pickup in as many situations as possible, right? So if I go to an open mic now, depending on the size of the room, it's often the case they'll plug this in and they'll be like, oh wait, we barely, they'll just leave a little bass coming out of this just to warm it up a little bit, but actually, right, in a resonant room, this is pretty loud. If I'm playing in a bigger room, the optimal setup for this is usually going to be a microphone, right, in front of it, the pickup as well to give a little bit more presence in the low end.
Would you use just like a SM57 or something, or?
I have an Octava small condenser microphone
Octava,
nice. that is the one that I usually use.
Small diaphragm, condenser, nice.
Aimed, usually I guess I usually put it over here so that aimed at the joint.
I do the same.
Guitar players in West Africa who play acoustic guitar do not use fingerpicks, right? Most of them. Ali Farka Touré does use some sometimes, but there's a whole other technique that you hear over there a lot, which is the use of the index finger in both directions.
In both directions. Yeah. They do that on the Cora as well? Do they do both directions? Yeah,
sometimes they'll do both directions. They'll flick and and so this is, I've tried doing claw hammer type things. I've tried this, like I said, this West African approach to things, and I think that's if I have a part of me that still identifies as a folk musician, it's this part of me that I think, like a lot of musicians in the past, it's like you had whatever you had, right? Whatever instrument you had, and you kind of tinkered with different approaches, trying to make this one instrument able to do different things, right? Yeah. And that's just, a composer thinks differently, right? But a musician who's focused on a specific instrument, trying to use it in different contexts to do different things, you end up tinkering with different approaches,
and that's part of the journey as
that's been a huge part of the journey for me, right?
Experimenting. I'm still experimenting. I'm in it, and that's part of it. It's the joy.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. I noticed that in the West African music, that they often have instruments that are more like our 5-string banjo, where there's actually a high note that is kind of anchoring the tonality in some way, right? Yeah. And so I guess I sort of set about kind of methodically exploring how you could basically modify standard tuning in subtle ways to play in different keys. So one of the tunings I use a lot is this tuning, which is going to be, I've got a capo on, but if we were just speaking of the open strings, this would be D, A, D, so like a drop D, and then F sharp, right? Now this enables you to play, of course, in a kind of D major, like a drop D, using a D major sound, where now, this B string is the 6th, and this E string is the 9th of the scale. That's an original piece, the beginning of an original piece of mine, where I'm playing what I would call a straight rumba bass line, like something you would hear in all kinds of music from the Caribbean or all over Africa. So this is one of the very basic thumb patterns that I've spent years and years playing different kinds of things over just this one pattern, right? It sort of has the place that has the blues.
What's the rhythm of that?
So we are in 4/4, and the way to count that is 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. Okay. Right? So if it's you have eighth notes in your bar, and this is a dotted quarter, and a quarter. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. This is one of the most common rhythms you'll hear on the radio today as well, right? Shape of You, right? Or dunk ga ga gum ga, right? Reggaeton, all those kinds of things are all based. This is what's called what some people might refer to as like the universal syncopation. A lot of my journey was understanding how different rhythms, if you orchestrate them differently, which means flip them around. Like if I just take what I just played, right? I've got just this backbeat in my thumb, right? And this dun, dun, which is 1 2 3 1, right? This the syncopation I was talking about, right? If I flip that upside down, I'm playing down, dun, 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 and the high, and I've put this syncopation that was in the high, boom, dum. Da da da, right? It's just but learning. We spend so many hours and hours and hours automating our hands, right, to be able to play one of these rhythms. Yeah. I can't. Did it take me thousands of hours to retrain my hand to flip those rhythms around? Yeah. It took a long time. It was not easy. Another tuning that I use a lot is just drop D. The people often use that to play in D with a kind of sus sound. Right?
Yeah.
Or, right, that kind of sound. I use this tuning to play in G.
So you're playing the open G a lot. That's kind of like
the drone.
The drone,
right?
Huh?
So the drone here is this middle G string.
Yeah.
And then you can hear in these patterns, and so I'm like, that's right. That's the beat.
That's the beat.
Da da. And my thumb is playing off beats.
To get your thumb used to not playing,
to not carrying the beat. Exactly. It's really my index finger that is carrying the beat, right? And how long did it take? A long time. If you listen to old recordings of somebody like Robert Johnson or Muddy Waters or somebody playing a song, I often wonder, it's like, okay, how many times have they played that song by the time we get to the recording that we're hearing, right? Often it's like hundreds or thousands of times that song has been played by the time we got to the recorded version we're listening. And that's just totally different from being, Bob Dylan or one of those guys who, you write the song and maybe a month later you go in the studio and you record it and you capture a different energy
absolutely
there as well, right?
Yeah.
It's just one is not necessarily better than the other, but no. That's this thing of keeping the song around and letting your relationship to it deepen over the years. Is
letting it breathe as well.
Yeah.
It's like, I like to let a song. I have so many like unfinished songs.
Yeah.
And I say like I kind of put myself down by saying like, oh man, I should really get to those songs and I should finish them. But sometimes it's just nice to let them breathe and let them just sit and come back to them. And you can if you come back to a song with a different headspace, then you can almost like revitalize it or put it in a different direction than it would have been if you'd just completely finished it.
Yeah, if you'd had this right? Like, okay, go, get it out there,
Yeah, for sure.
Just different approaches.
For sure, man. All right, cool. Let's wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Is that all right? We're running out.
What a pleasure it's been. We could keep going.
We could
for a long time.
I think we're gonna have to have another one.
Yeah.
So I really hope you enjoyed that chat I had with Nick Morrison. If you want to find out a bit more about Nick, then links are in the description down below. And let me know what you thought about this style of video. This is the first time I've done an interview. It's not the most perfect interview, but let me know if you want to see more things like this. I'm thinking of maybe making this a thing, interviewing local musicians here in Berlin and maybe elsewhere around Europe. Let me know if you want to see more of that. Other than that, have a great day, and I'll see you again in the next video very soon. Bye.